Well, Mike, as far as the ESPN story goes, a very well sourced, well reported story. I think, there's 2 points to make about this story as a whole. Number one, there's a lot of smoke there. Without any question, there's a lot of smoke there. Maybe you could point to one or two of the allegations in the story and say, oh, they're reaching, or I'm not buying that or whatever. But let's face it. Right now, it is Dan Snyder faced off against the National Football League. And I guess my second point would be, this is a man, Daniel Snyder, who when he bought the franchise a little over 2 decades ago, he talked about the immense love he had for this franchise, how he loved it and how he became a huge fan and everything about it, the Joe Gibbs, Bobby Beathard, Jack Kent Cook days, the wonderful competitiveness, the how tough a home field RFK Stadium was, everything. It was all love. And what has Daniel Snyder done? What has his regime done, essentially? He's run the franchise into the ground. So that now, the most interesting part of the story to me, Mike, was the part of it where you're talking about how it's an Eagles home game when the Eagles played at Washington recently. And yet the ticket sellers, the business side people, in Washington are saying, hey, we did our job. We sold the tickets, and so that's what it's come down to. The franchise is so downtrodden that you're okay when some other franchise comes to your city and puts whatever it was, 30 or 35,000 people in the seats to cheer for the visiting team, which is what happens anytime the Cowboys play there now, or the Eagles, less with the Giants because they've been so bad recently, but who knows about now. But I guess I would just make this overriding point. Daniel Snyder, if you love this franchise so much, if you truly want to see greatness with this franchise, stop being the most selfish person in the District of Columbia and in the area right now. Because what you're doing is you're preventing this franchise from healing, moving on, and getting a fresh start. Sell the team. Sell the team. Don't be selfish anymore if you truly love this franchise.
Yeah, I think he's incapable of ever even relating to the point that way. And the point you made about going to FedEx Field to root for the visiting team, my son, huge Vikings fan, he went up to a Steelers-Vikings game 4 or 5 years ago. I said, don't wear anything Vikings related. Don't wear anything purple. Don't even carry a plum around in your pocket. Nothing purple on you when you go to this game. He's talking about going to the game in Washington. It's like, deck yourself out. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. No one's going to say boo to you there. You're probably going to find more like-minded individuals in that stadium than you will Commanders fans, and that's just the way it is right now. The big news out of that story from yesterday was at the very top. A lot of times, Peter, in these 10,000-word articles that I really don't think anybody reads all the way through, but they act like they do, was the idea that Snyder is carrying around dirt on other owners and on Commissioner Roger Goodell that is his leverage against being pushed out. And I've been saying more speculative than based on anything real, but it's kind of informed, educated. We see what he's done with others. We see how ruthless he can be. People believe he's the one who leaked the John Gruden emails, not the league office, not anyone else but him. And obviously he had possession of them. And I'm not saying he did leak them. Please, I don't want to get sued on a Friday morning or any morning, afternoon, or evening for that matter. But there are people in the league who believe he leaked them. That's a great warning shot to anyone who may want to mess with him. That's the big takeaway for me, and that's why they haven't pushed him out. That's why they haven't had a vote. That's why no vote's on the agenda next week. They're trying to find some other way for him to be removed from this mix. And I think they're hoping that the House Oversight Committee releases something that is sufficiently strong and negative, that sparks a groundswell, that makes it a natural occurrence. Like what happened with Robert Sarver, I think is his name, the former Phoenix Suns owner. The NBA imposed a significant punishment on him, released some facts, unlike the NFL, which has released no facts about Daniel Snyder dating back to July 1 of 2021, and then nature kind of took its course. I think they're waiting for some moment that causes nature to take its course, and they hope that the laws of that specific nature will apply to Daniel Snyder, and it just becomes a natural outcome that he sells the team. I think that's what they're hoping for.
You know, it's clear right now that something is holding up this process of reckoning for Daniel Snyder. Whether or not he'd be forced to sell the team, you know, one of the other parts of this story, Mike, that I think you noticed, Seth Wickersham was all over ESPN talking about it yesterday, and I think it's fascinating that the NFL almost always gives owners who are building new stadiums a break financially. They allow them maybe to borrow a little bit more money than is allowed under league strictures. But in this particular case, they think maybe that the way to really get to Dan Snyder is to not allow him to go beyond any of the financial strictures that are in place to prevent owners from borrowing too much money and to be in hock too much when they build a stadium. And their hope is that if they do this, that Snyder clearly won't be able to build a stadium. But I think when I was hearing that yesterday, I just thought how hilarious that was. You know why? No entity in the greater Washington area is going to give Daniel Snyder any sort of break, you know, in building a stadium in their municipalities, in their states, in their districts, for a very simple reason. They understand how disastrously flawed he is as the runner of a franchise. So it isn't like, for instance, if the Green Bay Packers suddenly had to build a new stadium tomorrow, you know, if Lambeau Field was disintegrating. You know how many places in Wisconsin would step up and say, "Oh, we'll give you this break, we'll give you that break, we'll give whatever. Just come here." You know, they'd prostrate themselves to basically say, "You do whatever you want. We just want the Packers here." And there's almost like right now, the Washington franchise has a repellent around it. And that's why I think this is going to be so difficult. They keep saying that they need a new stadium. FedEx Field stinks. I get it, because FedEx Field does stink. But whatever the deal is, you know, who is going to help Daniel Snyder now build a stadium? So they're hoping that the combination of the fact that nobody wants Snyder's stadium and that he's not going to get any financial help from the league, that maybe that pushes him over the top.
In Green Bay, all you got to do is pass the hat. Give everyone a piece of paper that says you're a part owner of the team, even if you're not, and you get all the money that you need. In Washington, you're right. That's never going to happen. I'm far more dubious than you are, though, about the idea that the NFL isn't going to help Snyder. I think, as you said, it doesn't matter if the NFL helps him or not, because nobody else is going to help him. But it wasn't that long ago that the NFL relaxed its loan cap for Snyder so he could buy out his 3 limited partners who couldn't wait to get out from
what has happened since
his
then?
Control. Well, but Peter, that was all at the same time. That was all. Listen, they could have dealt with him July of 2021, and somebody decided not to. Somebody decided, after all that money they paid to attorney Beth Wilkinson to investigate the situation for 10 months, to not ask her to provide a written report with written recommendations. Because as 106.7 The Fan initially reported in D.C., and as we confirmed back in February, if she had been asked to reduce her recommendations to writing, one of the recommendations would have been require him to sell the team. Somebody gave him a pass July 2021. So in my mind, something has to change between then, which wasn't all that long ago, and now to get the league in the mood to do something. And there's been reporting that some owners are starting to get there, but until 24 do, you can't go after him. And you have to be ready for him to fight you in every court that he could possibly muster a colorable legal claim. And you've got to be ready for him to pull the pin on his dirt grenade, if he has one. Everything he has about anyone that he can take down with him. And I don't know that they're ready for that. So that's why I think they're looking for some other natural, organic way that he decides I'm going to sell. And maybe it is, I can't find anybody to sell me land. I can't find any. Now, he does have some land purchased there or something like that. You hear different stories about where it all stands. But I can't muster the governmental assistance that others would easily get. So that's what's going to cause me to sell the team. But I don't know where the end game is here. And I don't think the league knows where it is because they don't want to force the end game, because that's when he becomes dangerous. Backed into a corner, lashes out, drops the dirt that he has on others, whether it's real, whether it's imagined, or somewhere in between. Nobody wants to mess with that. And so we're kind of at this weird impasse where the situation continues. And is it sustainable? I don't know. They've managed to sustain it for well over a year.
Mike, you know what I was thinking of yesterday reading this story? I was thinking that, okay, it looks like the NFL just wants to passively let this thing go and does not want to force anything to happen because for whatever reason, if it is, as the ESPN story claims, because they fear Daniel Snyder going nuclear legally and in the public arena, maybe that is it. It kind of reminded me of what happened with the Golden State Warriors and Draymond Green. Even though you and I are probably the last to be fans of the NBA, for no other reason than can we have a life other than football? And me, I kind of like baseball. But so we don't know that much about the NBA. But we do know that TMZ had Draymond Green dropping one of his teammates with an incredibly lead fist of a punch in the middle of practice. Who does that to a teammate? Drops them to the floor with a gigantic punch in the middle of practice. And then
Steve
what
Smith,
did the Warriors do
twice.
on Monday of this week? They did nothing. They did nothing. They suspended a guy. They would not suspend a guy, but they fined him. And here's a guy who in his career has made $155 million. What exactly does a fine mean? Unless you're going to fine him $106 million, what really does a fine of, pick a number, $500,000? What does that mean to Draymond Green? You know? And so I thought that the Golden State Warriors are fearful for some reason of suspending Draymond Green. Okay, whatever that reason is, I don't know. I don't cover the team, but they have some fear about suspending him. What would it do to team chemistry? Whatever. In the same way, you know, I think the NFL has some fear with having a public reckoning with Daniel Snyder, which quite honestly should happen Tuesday at the one-day league meeting in New York. There should be some sort of moment in that meeting where we say, listen, there's an elephant in the room. His name is Daniel Snyder. Let's discuss it. And maybe you have to discuss it being very careful legally about what to do about it. But this has got to come to a head at some point because it's really damaging to the brand. And Mike, the other thing that I keep saying, I've said it on this show. Okay, when I was very young in this business and I was covering the New York Giants in the 80s, I thought that when I first went to RFK Stadium for a game between New York and Washington, and it was a close game in the second half, and all of a sudden, the earth started moving. And the press box that I started going up and down, I'm talking about 6 or 8 inches that if you were walking in the press box, you had to hold on, and so I'll never forget thinking, man, this is a big, big deal. These games are gigantic. These games are the pinnacle of this sport. And now what has happened in the intervening 35 years? I'll tell you what has happened. An owner bought the team. He ran the franchise into the ground. And nobody feels good about this franchise. Not a soul. And that's why I think somehow, some way, somebody has got to force this situation to a conclusion. And the rightful conclusion is that he be made to sell the team. Now, can it happen legally? Probably not, at least right now. And that is why this current investigation by the league, I think, is so important. And if there are significant ills in Mary Jo White's that she discovers in her investigation of the culture, of the toxic culture of this franchise, then serious things need to happen. And I think depending on what she finds, I think that is really going to be the next step in the NFL doing what it really wants to do, and that's to get this franchise out of the hands of Daniel Snyder.
The key question is whether they let Mary Jo White reduce it all to writing and whether they tell us what Dan Snyder did or bury it shamefully like they did with the Beth Wilkinson investigation. And they sold us this bill of goods that, well, we can't share any of the details because some of the individuals requested anonymity, and there's no way we can share anything about this without violating that request, which is the word that the Bears fans were chanting last night after Dante Pettis did not draw a penalty flag for pass interference on 3rd and goal. One last point very quickly. This is something we've mentioned many times over the last year and a half. Dan Snyder is determined to give the team to his kids. That's why his heels are dug in. This just isn't petulant 5-year-old temper tantrum. He wants to give the team to his kids. And we've suggested months ago, and last night Michael Smith mentioned this on the pregame, the possibility of compromise that has Dan Snyder stand down and his kids get the team. I've suggested his wife be the bridge to the kids getting the team. But, Peter, I just can't help but wonder, is this a situation where the NFL just wants anyone named Snyder out, gone, forever? We don't want the kids. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and I feel I shouldn't say that because we don't know. We don't know anything about the kids. I don't even know their names. But I just feel like that ship has sailed. Maybe it would have been a possibility at some point, but I feel like right now the push against Snyder is a push against the entire Snyder family, and they don't want him involved directly or indirectly because if he's even indirectly in the building or in the vicinity of it, he's going to find a way to keep his imprint on the team.
What prevents Daniel Snyder from every day having a conversation with his wife, with his kids, with whoever? What prevent nothing? Absolutely nothing. If I'm a fan of that team, that is a 1% improvement. That's all. That doesn't solve anything. That's, to me, people who suggest that Tanya Snyder ought to be the owner of this team. Who are you kidding? Who are you kidding? What difference does that make, really? Come on. I mean, this thing has got to be put in the hands of somebody new. I don't care who it is. Fred Smith. I don't care who it is. This thing's got to be put in the hands of somebody new ideas, a new name, a new day for a franchise that has been ridiculously dragged through the mud for years and years.
Let me give you one last thing before we break. It's a personal example and experience that shows how afraid the league is currently of Dan Snyder. Now, this happened back in May, Peter, but at the league meeting in May, the commissioner was asked about Dan Snyder's status, and he said Dan Snyder is not involved in any way, shape, or form with the day-to-day operations of the team. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the strength of the statement that the commissioner made. The very next day, the Washington Times reported that Snyder is back and has been back in defiance of the mandate that was handed down by Roger Goodell. And I asked the league for comment on that story. And the comment was, well, Roger addressed that yesterday. Oh, yeah, I know he did. But you have a report from the Washington Times that basically is saying Dan Snyder is giving Roger the middle finger. And you don't have a response to that? It illustrates to me that they are tiptoeing on eggshells around this guy. And I don't know who it is that is so afraid of Dan Snyder that they're paralyzed by whatever it is that he's carrying around in his little folder of dirt that he's going to drop on whoever, whenever, however. But it's kept him alive this long, at least in his status as owner of the team, and we'll see how much longer it keeps him in that spot. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.